quote me on that because I didn't use them at all. Anyway, you have 12 different melee abilities that you can unlock, and some of them are restricted to certain weapon types. For example, you can use a very useful AoE spinning attack with a two-handed sword, which damages all enemies around you. Or if you decide to go with a two-handed axe or polearms, you can attempt to stun the enemy with a different ability. My favorite ability with the two-handed sword was the execute move that you can use when the enemy is knocked down. It's basically an instant kill every time, but it only works on smaller enemies. Speaking about the knockdown, there is a kick ability which can help you with that, and it's usable when you're blocking, which is extremely useful. However, the chance for success is based on percentage that you can increase when you dump more points into this ability. Your regular attack can turn into a special attack which can knock down the enemy or cause heavy damage. This can feel a bit awkward, and you can even put yourself in a disadvantage when some of these RNG abilities trigger. Regular attacks are quite fast, and when these special abilities trigger, the attack animation is a lot longer, which leaves you open for attacks. I'm not a huge fan of RNG abilities in games with action combat systems. I don't mind the kick ability, which has the chance to fail, but when I press the basic attack button, I like to have consistency, so I know what to expect. There is only a certain amount of randomness which proper action combat systems can afford to have. Otherwise, the combat can feel really, well, random. You can make an argument that RNG is supposed to mimic the dice roll, which is one of the features that have deep roots in the RPG genre. This works fine for turn-based RPGs, but it doesn't blend so well with action combat systems. The most common RNG mechanic in RPGs with action combat systems would probably be the critical chance. There are probably a couple of more RNG features that can work well, but it's kind of hard to pull off anything else which is based around RNG. I think the whole point of action combat systems in RPGs is finding a good balance between skills that require muscle memory and the progression system. Come to think of it, before you can actually invest points and use the skills in this game, you have to find the skill books. You can buy them off at various merchants, which is also pretty random, but you'll find these books just by exploring the world. It's not a huge problem because you're probably going to find the majority of skills you want to use, but still, I'm not a huge fan of this. I believe I had the same criticism in my Assassin's Creed Valhalla review. Learning new abilities just felt extremely random in that game. But anyway, I was pleasantly surprised with the AI in combat. You're going to fight multiple enemies almost all the time, and they will usually try to surround you, which can actually make the fight a lot harder. Ranged enemies will try to keep out of the melee range, and NPCs even start running if their health is low. You have to face the enemy in order to block, so you can take some heavy damage from the sides and the back. The only thing which makes this more frustrating than it should be is the targeting system. The game has a soft lock-on system which is not really responsive. Switching targets in melee range can be really clumsy, and I died a lot because of this. The gameplay is quite fast, so you don't have a ton of time to react, which would be fine if the targeting was done better. The game doesn't play around on the hard difficulty, you can die in just a couple of hits, especially if you don't invest some points into health. With each level you gain, you get some stat points to invest. No matter what kind of a playstyle you're going for, if you don't increase your health pool, you're going to have a tough time in combat, especially on the hard difficulty. There is another extremely useful combat mechanic if you decide to play with melee weapons. The parry is a very powerful move, and it doesn't require an extremely precise timing from the player. As long as you hold the block button when you get hit, you have a huge window for pressing the attack button, which will make the hero perform a couple of hits in a row. This attack has a huge AoE effect, and you will hit everything around you for some heavy damage. It's really good, and even a little bit OP sometimes. But like I said, the game can easily kick your ass if you let your guard down. It was very common for me to enter the fight and kill a bunch of NPCs with few parries and other abilities, but I also got killed a bunch of times by the same enemies in some situations. I mentioned that the game is surprisingly well balanced before, and for a good reason. If you wanna maximize the damage you deal, you just have to pay attention to enemies' resistances. You can see these icons on all enemies, with some weird exceptions, and they pretty much show what type of damage you should not use. For example, you have two different types of melee damage, blunt and slash I guess. I don't know the official names because I don't believe it's ever mentioned. If the enemy is resistant to blunt damage, all of your blunt weapons will have a very noticeable penalty on the damage output. It's always a good idea to switch the weapon in those situations because even a much weaker weapon with a different damage type will do more damage. I think this is another example how good is the balancing in this game. To make things clear, this is not only related to melee weapons. You'll have to pay attention to resistances in general, especially as a mage, because magic has more than a couple of different damage types. What makes switching your weapons and abilities very easy in this game is 3 different profiles that you can switch on the fly with the press of a button. My first profile was for heavy armor with slashing damage, the second was for all of my spells and
The
mage
fuck, New
equipments,
World's
and
suddenly
the
not
third was a
launching.
direct to blunt melee
Oh,
damage.
come on.
You will have a lot better experience in combat if you set up your profiles for different damage types and use them accordingly. Two Worlds 2 also managed to find a great balance between crafting and buying new weapons. It's pretty easy to increase the strength of the weapon, and the materials can be acquired by scrapping the items you don't need. Every now and then, you'll be able to find stronger weapons at merchants and replace even your fully upgraded weapon. However, it takes a while for that to happen, so it doesn't feel pointless to upgrade your weapon. And you get to scrap the weapon you were using, so you can increase the strength of your new weapon, and it's a pretty good gameplay loop. Weapons and armors have gem slots as well, and you can considerably increase the power of an item with high level gems. To make the customization even more enjoyable, the game allows you to buy different dyes, which you can apply on armor pieces. Now let's talk a little bit about the magic system.
Tell me, you ever stop talking?
I mentioned this magic system in more than a couple of my videos, and for a good reason. It allows you to be very creative with your spells, and it's definitely the best way to experience the gameplay. First of all, you need the amulet and a bunch of magic cards to make a spell. The effect and carrier card is like the base for the spell you want to make, and then you start adding different modifiers. You can make some regular basic spells like fire projectiles, traps, summoning different monsters, healing, etc, etc. But you can also make some crazy combinations when you invest some more points into magic related skills. I will now play a couple of short clips from my older videos about this magic
What the
system,
fuck?
so you can see how crazy it can get. Adding different modifiers. You can make some regular basic spells like fire projectiles, traps, summoning different monsters, healing, etc, etc. But you can also make some crazy combinations when you invest some more points